Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Corner Office here on this lovely Monday evening. Yeah. Weeks have kind of been flying by for me. It's been busy now that we've gotten to playoff time and stuff, but there's really nothing going on. We're in one of those little lull phases before we get to March where things really start to ramp up. And I don't remember if anybody is a really day one listener, but we kind of started this whole podcast thing during March, or during early February into March of a year or two ago.
2 years ago.
2 years
It's
ago.
been almost exactly 2 years.
Yeah, and a lot of our focus on that was around the college basketball scene. And that's something that we haven't really touched on yet all year, and we've been waiting to do it. And we think that now is kind of a perfect time as we ramp up towards the conference tournament schedule and obviously the Ncaa tournament, which is my favorite sports event of the year. I'm excited to touch on that. And I mean, look, when you lose the NFL for a while, and this is kind of when spring training starts for baseball. So maybe if you're a baseball fan, you're tuned in. For me, this is the time where the NBA is kind of really boring. We just had the All-Star game, which we'll touch on. I'm not a hockey guy, so I don't really know what's going on over there. And this is the time when you can really look at these college basketball games during their closing games of their conference season and be like, this is what basketball is about.
And we're not delegating to the sport because we don't enjoy it.
No.
It's just that college basketball is on such a schedule that at the beginning of the season, it's all tune-up games for the first however long it may be.
Yep.
And then once, it takes teams a while to get into conference play. And around this stage of the season is where we know what teams are good, we know which teams are disappointing, and we know when it's a big upset or a big win for a team. And we know when we're seeing a matchup that potentially we may see again later in March. So this is definitely a time to get into college basketball if you're not.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, you talked about how spring training is starting.
Yes.
This is the first time that I've been excited to watch opening day baseball in 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
I'm
is that
very
because of
excited
Juan
to watch.
Soto or because of the Red Sox moves?
It has nothing to do with Juan Soto. That's what I mean. This is the first time I'm excited to watch Red Sox opening day in years.
Okay.
And growing up, I was a baseball fan first and foremost. I never watched basketball or hockey or college sports whatsoever. It was baseball and football. So it's a refreshing feeling. I think the Red Sox may have won the offseason this year, but we're definitely going to have an episode on that a little later on.
Yeah, they made some really big moves. And yeah, we're going to talk baseball a little bit later because I think, baseball is one of those games where you go through stages in life where everyone kind of starts off as a baseball fan. Most people's first sporting events is oh, your dad is going to take you out to the ball game. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then as you progress, you start to look at other things. Basketball, oh my goodness, this 10 out of 10 girl is walking by and you're I want to go play basketball and whatnot. I don't know why I did the girl analogy. I'm going to stop doing that now. But then you start exploring and you start looking at different stuff and you kind of move away from baseball because it's on paper, it's just not as cool. It's just not.
There's no 10 out of 10 girls at a baseball game.
That's not what I meant by that. I was referring to basketball as a 10 out of 10 sport. But nonetheless, you start to move away from it and you start to, unless you're big on it, in high school or something like that. I personally wasn't. I moved away from it in my high school years. And then nowadays, you kind of start to look around at baseball players and you're like, man, they live the life that you want to live. You get paid an obscene amount of money to play decent. You got to go 1 for 3, to be one of the best players of all time. And you just chill with your boys in the dugout. And it's sick. And it's a little different for you, Jack, because Jack played baseball in high school and I didn't. But I think that it's something that you can appreciate. And then, nowadays we've kind of delegated towards, the golf and baseball side. And that part of my brain is kind of tuning in.
There is not much better. There's no more nostalgic feeling than a late summer night sitting down watching a baseball game.
Yeah. Yeah. I as a kid, used to dream about playing in the Cape Cod League just because we used to go and watch games when we were kids. And just now, I just got a reel for the Cape Cod Baseball League a few days ago. And I was like, man, that would be sick. And then I was like, wait a minute, I've never played baseball before.
When we were little, we used to go to the Cape Cod baseball games together. And every time
Chatham Anglers. We used to come out of there with like
And the
16
Harwichport
balls.
Mariners. Yeah, we used to just like go find. We spent 3 hours finding every single foul ball that we could, and then trying to get all the players to sign our gloves after the game.
Yep.
There probably is like we probably met some like seriously cool dudes there, but we would have like no idea because it was like the 2013 Chatham Anglers.
Yeah, but I mean, so baseball season I do think is going to be something exciting, but now that it's in spring training, don't really mind. I don't know if you've seen this on Twitter though. Like Juan Soto has kind of been walking around in his entire Mets outfit. Have you seen this?
Yeah.
He like gifted someone a car the other day for like giving him his number, and he pulled up to like give him the car, like wearing his Mets jersey, just like
it
out
was
in
for
public.
it was for Brett Beatty.
Is that a part of his contract? You think like $900 million? You have to wear the Mets uni everywhere you go.
You can't. You have to sleep in the Mets uniform.
Yeah. we have special pajamas made especially for you, Juan. I do hope that he does well, and honestly, the Subway Series will be pretty cool. But those two teams are not two teams that I'm super fond of. But yeah, we'll talk baseball a little bit later. Let's get back on to what we have planned, though. College basketball. We were just talking about it. Conference tournaments coming up. I think the last few games in conference play are like this week, and then you get to the conference tournament next week, where obviously anything can happen. You see teams like NC State last year who made a crazy run into the national tournament, who had to win the ACC tournament in order to get to March Madness. So anything like that can always happen.
We watched Zach Gallen play in Chatham.
You were just looking that up that whole time?
Sorry, I've been so locked out.
All right, Zach Gallen.
Zach Gallen, do you know who he is?
No.
He was like, he's the pitcher for the Diamondbacks that wears the glasses.
Okay.
Sorry.
How did you find that out?
Just looked up Chatham Anglers 2014 roster.
That's
Last year he started 28 games and went.
Nice.
Where's his win? 14-6, and the year before he went 17-9.
Okay.
So
good player.
Good player.
Cape Cod Baseball League legend. What I was saying though is the conference tournament season is something that is super important because obviously bids are at an all-time high. If you win some leagues, you get an automatic tournament bid. And what I was talking about was NC State going to the Final Four last year and having to win the ACC in order to get to the tournament. So it's kind of one of these times where like most of the time during college basketball, anything can happen. But this is when anything can happen with repercussions for the tournament. And a lot of these teams who are still looking to solidify their seed, whether that's on the bubble, like a West Virginia, a Baylor, or even a Kansas right now, can they, work their way up and can they get high quality wins in this time to, bolster their seeding and then obviously go into the tournament. I think most of the one seeds are kind of set right now. That being Duke, Florida, Kansas, or Duke, Florida, Auburn, and Houston. I think that those four teams will probably be the one seeds in the tournament. But that being said, anything can happen. And we are going to be talking about all five of the major conferences in college basketball and giving you guys a prediction as to who we think is going to come out on top of the conference tournament schedule. This could age really poorly. But that being said,
it historically has.
Yep. Yeah, but you can never really predict college basketball. And as much as I would love to do a whole tournament breakdown, when that bracket comes out, we're going to be super wrong about it again. But it is a lot of fun.
We're going to fill out the whole thing and be super wrong about it. So
it is a lot of fun, though. So I'm excited to get to talk about it. Do you have a conference that you want to start in?
I think that we should go alphabetically with the Big Five. Big Five being ACC, Big 10, Big 12, SEC, and Big East.
Okay, so
let's start with the ACC.
Alphabetically would have the Big East before the SEC.
But I was just naming the Big Five conferences.
All right, fine. You said alphabetically.
Okay, let's get this out of the way. ACC is the worst. Yeah. ACC is the worst is the worst that it's been in name your number of years. When was the last time the ACC was this bad?
It's been bad.
Possibly not in our lifetime.
Look, I think that this is always what happens, though, is the SEC, especially last year, was kind of the same way. Everybody was like, oh, my goodness, the SEC is the best conference in college basketball. And then you have like 3 or 2 or 4 ACC teams in the Elite Eight, like in the Sweet 16. Like, there are teams that just kind of show up in March. But that being said, Yeah, top to bottom, it's been one of the weakest conferences in basketball right now. And the only team that I think has really stood out from the rest of the bunch here has been Duke. They have 3 teams in the top 25, which is crazy for the ACC. Normally you see a Carolina, a Wake Forest maybe sneaks in, a Pittsburgh, like these teams that Virginia, yeah, they've been bad, but they've struggled with some coaching stuff. Syracuse has been awful. NC State has been awful coming off their Final Four run. Florida has fallen apart. They were in the Final
Florida
Four.
State.
No, Miami.
Gotcha.
That's what I meant. Sorry, Miami has fallen apart. And Florida State's not great either, but Miami was in the Final Four like 2 years ago under Jim Larinaga with Isaiah Wong and a bunch of guys. They had Normad Ochier. That was a good team. I don't remember everybody on the team, but they had some really good players. So that team has been, absolutely horrible. I think the 2 teams that you have to highlight right now from the ACC, aside from Duke, who's, clearly the best team in the ACC right now, are Louisville, who have had probably the best single season turnaround I've ever seen under a new head coach. Pat Kelsey from Charleston took over this Louisville program from Kenny Payne and has brought them back to a 20-win basketball program, which is not something that I think a lot of people were expecting because they have been so bad for the past couple of years. But the pickups of Chucky Hepburn and a few other guys, they got, Kayshawn Pryor, who went down early with an ACL injury, unfortunately. Terrence Edwards was a big transfer for them. Rain Smith, big transfer for them from Charleston, actually, so he followed on the way down. They've been really impressive, I think, right now. Noah Waterman, Traore, they have been really impressive right now. And as much as I don't think that they're super dangerous come March, because I just don't think that they have that experience, it's good to see a team like Louisville back in the top 25. And then Clemson. Clemson is the only team that has given Duke a loss in conference. They're a very dangerous team. They were another one of these teams. They were in the Elite Eight last year, Final Four.
Clemson?
Yeah. I don't remember how far they made it.
They made it far. They did not make it to the Final Four.
I'm going to look it up. Yeah. They finished in the Elite Eight last year, but you lose PJ Hall and a few other guys on that team. So, Ian Shefflin's really stood up.
They've had guys down the ranks for a couple of seasons now who've been getting ready to take over that role.
Correct. Ian Shefflin's one of those guys, I think, for clear. And they got a big transfer from Cincinnati, Victor Larkin, who has kind of showed up against both UNC and Duke and been one of their best players. Jaden Zachary from BC just transferred there for his 5th year. He's been really good. And then Chase Hunter, who, has been a fantastic point guard for the past 2 seasons. They've been a really dangerous team. I think the biggest story, though, out of the ACC isn't really the teams that have done well. It's the teams that have done poorly.
Agreed.
And one of those teams has been UNC, a team that you perennially always see in the top 25 who returned a lot of really good pieces and just has not been able to put it together.
So when speaking about UNC, you're talking about now you're retaining the last of the players from the Roy Williams era.
Correct.
And by players, I mean RJ Davis. He's the last one.
Yes. Because they graduated Armando Bacot and a few others last year.
And Caleb Love left.
Right. And Caleb Love left for Arizona 2 years ago, I think.
Last year. And so now you're looking at this UNC team and you haven't been really able to figure it out since you went to the national championship 2 seasons ago.
Okay.
How long is Hubert Davis's leash as head coach?
I don't know. I think he's a really good recruiter, which is one of the reasons that he's still on the roster and hasn't been in coaching firing conversations this year. But to be honest with you, I don't think that this is the UNC basketball that people were expecting to see. They're a bubble team at the best right now. A team that's borderline almost eliminated from the tournament altogether. And the pieces that they have, like Ian Jackson's a top 25 player, top 15 player. Elliot Cadeau was a top 15 player in his class. RJ Davis is the retaining, ACC player of the year.
Yeah.
You have Seth Trimble, who was, a really solid defender last year. I just don't think that they have the front court. They've had some really, really bad bigs playing a lot of minutes for them. Cade Tyson. What's the guy's name? It's, I don't know, Washington, I think, something like that. Jalen Washington, maybe.
Jalen Washington.
They've just been really reliant on guys who just have not been capable at the forward position. And I think that that's one of the things that's dug them into a really big hole this year is, obviously you lose Armando Bacot last year, who is, a really, really good college basketball player. He probably won't ever be something special in the NBA, right? Because it's just like that's kind of how the fifth year works is, you use your year to play another year in college. And, you probably knew that you weren't NBA ready. He'll probably be a G League two-way type of guy. But for a college basketball player, he was exactly what you needed. And I think that they didn't address the need at the forward position as much as I think they should have. And this team has just not really been clicking. They got really manhandled by Duke, and they've rattled off a few wins here and there. I think they're on a 2 or 3 game win streak right now, but like the strength of schedule for the ACC right now is just so low that no one cares. You know what I mean? So like you're beating teams that no one really cares about.
Right. So if we're going to wrap up the ACC here, I think that a lot of people are listening because they want to get our takes on tournament talk.
Yeah.
And if we're going to talk about teams here in the ACC that could possibly be a sleeper tournament team, in terms of having an upset, I think you have to look at both SMU and Wake Forest as good teams who play pretty well. SMU plays pretty well on the road.
Yep.
Wake Forest plays very well at home.
Yep.
That could possibly, if they're like an 11 seed, take down a 5. You know what I mean? Like they could possibly have an upset this season.
Yeah, I like Wake Forest. I think Clemson will be a really hard matchup for whoever gets them. And I think that Louisville, under the right circumstances, could make some noise. But if you're talking dark horses, I really only think that Wake Forest is the one. I don't see SMU being a super solid team come tournament time. And then just like my pick for conference champion this year is Duke. I simply think that there isn't a team that's on par with them. And if they're going to have home court advantage this entire year, they've been 15-0 at home.
15 and
Cameron. No, they haven't lost at home. They haven't lost at home.
You're right.
Cameron Indoor has been kind of a fortress this year, so I don't see them losing in their own gym. And the teams that they're going to have to play to do that, I don't think are going to really pose them any issues. If I'm looking at this team, this standings overall, I think that you'll probably see Duke and Clemson in the final again for a rematch of that game that happened earlier this season. And I think Duke gets a statement win.
So let's move on now to the Big 12. This is a very top-heavy division, as we knew it was going to be when some of these teams started moving in. But especially compared to the past, I don't really see this conference making a ton of noise this year. I think that the biggest story coming out of here, similarly to the ACC, is Kansas being horrible. After having on paper, they were preseason number 1, were they not?
I think they were. Yeah.
I think they were. So the question is, what the hell is going on there?
Yeah, so they paid $4 million in NIL. So for them to be this bad is really, really bad. Obviously, I think, I really don't like Hunter Dickinson. I just don't think that he's that good of a player. I think that every team that he's kind of been on has underperformed when it comes to this. And at his 3 years in Michigan and his 2 years at Kansas just haven't really been up to par. And what I got to say about this team is you brought in a lot of players, a lot of guys. AJ Storr, Zeke Mayo, Dejon Harris is back. You know what I mean? Hunter Dickinson last year. You got Flory Badunga, who's a top 15 player.
You said AJ Storr?
Rylan Griffin. Yeah, I said AJ Storr. Rylan Griffin from Alabama, one of the best two-way players in the league. You know what I mean? In college. I don't know what the issue is, but this feels a lot like coaching to me. And it feels a lot like these guys are just not bought into the program. And this is the first time that Kansas has been unranked in, I think, 114 weeks or something like that. They've been ranked forever. You know what I mean? It's that's how shocking it is for this team to not be, in the top. Yeah, they just got knocked out of the AP poll for the first time since 2021. That's how dominant this program has been for that long. They've just they've been really underperforming in conference play. And their losses have been really bad losses.
They had a really bad loss this week.
They lost to BYU
by 40.
Yeah. Those losses are just, you can't excuse them. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like Bill Self has a lot of answers as to what's going wrong here. But coming into the end of the conference schedule, they play Colorado, who I have to imagine is going to be a win. That game's tonight. And then they play number 10 Texas Tech and number 4 Houston. Houston on the road. So that's another loss in conference play. You know what I mean? So at most, you're getting 3-1 out of the next few weeks, and you have to play 3 ranked opponents. So I think that this team could easily slip out of the bubble picture if they go 1-3 in their next few games, because that would take them to under 500.
Because they got off to such a hot start. They beat a good Michigan State team. They beat Duke, who is now number 2 in the country, if I'm not mistaken, as of today.
Yep.
They beat Iowa State when Iowa State was still a top 3 team in the country. So at what point did it kind of start to fall off the wagon? And I think that, they're another team you're looking at. They're what? A 12 seed?
Yeah, maybe.
Like,
I think they'll get a 7
underdog.
or an 8, something like that. Another team in this conference that's kind of underperformed this year, especially for the amount of NIL money that they dished out, has been Baylor. They're 8-8 in conference play. You got Jeremy Roach, Norman Ocher, VJ Edgecombe, a top 5 player in the class of 2025. Langston Love, like Robert Wright, who's another one of those guys. He's a Caden M guy. He's from Montverde. So like this team is supposed to be way better than they have been, and they've been super underperforming. I don't really know what's wrong with Jeremy Roach right now, but they overpaid him for the amount that he's been playing. And I could see this team sneaking into the tournament as like a 9-10 seed, but like, man, they've been really disappointing as well. I think this conference is ruled right now by Houston, though. Texas Tech is a really good team, but
they played
Houston. That's a matchup tonight. That's a great matchup. Houston at home is just an unbeatable team right now. And as much as I like Iowa State's defensive mindedness and some of the other things that go on in this conference, I can't take Houston I can't go against Houston if they're at home. So I'm going to go chalk here and take the number 1 seed in the Big 12 to get it done here. Win the conference.
If we're going to talk about winning the conference, are we talking regular season or are we talking conference championship? Because none of the games are at home.
Yeah,
for the conference championship, they all are at neutral ground.
Right.
And
I just think their defense travels. I just think that this team.
Well, so that's the point that I'm getting at. I think that this Houston team, undefeated on the road, obviously 1 loss at home. I don't see them losing, but also 3 of their losses have come on neutral ground, which is something you have to think of. And you're not playing small teams. So, I don't know. Houston's one of those teams that has such a solid foundation from their last few years that you are confident that they are going to go out there and give everything that they have in each game. They're a white suburban dad's favorite basketball team. And they're going to, everyone's dad is going to watch the game and be like, I like that guy. That guy's scrappy. You know what I mean?
They got a lot of dogs on Houston, yeah.
I'll agree with you here, and I'll go chalk. But I do think that a Texas Tech I don't think that Arizona will make a legitimate push. Texas Tech and Iowa State are both really dangerous in this conference.
Okay.
Let's go to Big East now. This is always one of the most fun conferences in basketball.
Yep.
I think partially because there's so little teams, and they are all so good that every single game is a shootout. It's like a complete slugfest.
You kind of don't know what's going to happen every time you watch a Big East game, and I think that is super entertaining.
Definitely, and I think that the biggest story here is how Rick Pitino has been able to lead these St. John's. What's their mascot?
The Johnnies.
Peacocks?
The Johnnies.
The
Red Storm.
Red Storm. Yeah,
it's not the Peacocks.
The St. John's Peacocks.
You're thinking of St. Peter's.
I'm definitely thinking of St. Peter's.
Yeah. You're thinking of St. Peter's, which is
St. John's Red Storm. So, what do you think that they're doing well, and do you think that they are a legitimate team moving forward?
Yeah, I think they're really dangerous. This is another team that, look, I'm a sucker for a team that's defensive-minded. I really don't like the way Alabama plays basketball because in any given day, they're going to give up 90 points, and if they score 100 points, they win, and if they don't, then they lose. You know what I mean? But St. John's, they keep teams in the 60s and the 70s while being, offensive-minded. This is a team that can hunker down and defend, especially in big moments. And this trench warfare attitude is something that Rick Pitino has kind of brought everywhere that he's been. I think this is the second best coaching job in the country right now, slightly behind Pat Kelsey when it comes to Coach of the Year, between him and Pitino. And I don't know who's going to win it, but either one of these guys, if they won it, I would be totally okay with. But yeah, I think that this is the second biggest story in the Big East this year. I don't necessarily think it's the biggest. I think the biggest story in the Big East right now is what's going on with UConn.
Right.
You have some really bad losses if you're UConn right now. You just lost. You got embarrassed by St. John's the other night. They lost to Seton Hall at the buzzer. It just feels like this is not a Dan Hurley team that we've been used to seeing. They don't have the punch. They don't have the power. And, I think that they were coming into the year as a team that was like expected to, potentially be in touch for this three-peat aspirations. I don't think that that was ever going to happen when you lose a guy like Klingon and then you lose a guy like Castle to the draft, Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton. You know what I mean? Like they lost a lot.
But they also did a great job recruiting.
Correct. The additions of Liam McNeely and Mahaney and, keeping Caravan on the roster, Terrace Reed, like they were supposed to be right back where they are right now. And I just don't think that they've, played up to their standard or up to their par or up to their mouth. I think, the world is kind of getting tired of Dan Hurley ranting and talking about, kind of talking out of his ass about like a bunch of stuff that's been going on in the Big East, making excuses. But I do think that the Johnnies have been the best team in this division thus far. That being said, I don't think that they're going to win the conference. And I would like to get your thoughts as to who you think is going to win the conference championship in the Big East.
I agree with you.
Okay.
And I think that it's because when you look at their home and away splits, it is such a glaring number.
Yep.
They're 17-0 at home.
Yep.
They're 6-2 on the road.
Yep.
Which is not bad.
Nope.
But they have no experience playing on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And that is huge when it comes to tournament play. I think that you have to look at a team like Creighton and think about them bringing back Kalkbrenner for at least his third season, possibly his fourth.
Yeah, he's been there for 4 or 5 years now.
I mean,
I think this is his grad year.
He leads this squad, and he's also incredibly difficult to guard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you have to think about Marquette with Cam Jones being one of the best players in the country.
Yep. Yeah, I don't disagree with your take there. I think that for me right now it is Creighton because I go with, okay, who is the team that has the guy who is the most unguardable player on the court at any given time? And that's Ryan Kalkbrenner.
Unless he's in foul trouble.
Unless he's in foul trouble. Yep. But Stephen Ashworth has been able to dish him the rock and, play their game. And he's had multiple performances in the high 30s, mid 40s. You know what
McDermott
I mean?
also knows how to coach in big games.
Correct. Where he's got like 30 and 12, 30 and 15. And when it comes to, these final pushes, these final games, I do think that it comes down to star power. And I just don't see that with a team like St. John's. I just don't see that with a team like UConn right now. I do see it with a team like Villanova, who, if they could sneak into the tournament, I think will be a little bit dangerous. I don't think that they're going to. I think it's a really tough road for them. But, Eric Dixon and Wooga Poplar and some other guys on that team, they're really dangerous if they could get over the hump.
But, I think that when you think about the Big East right now, the first thing that jumps off the page is coaching. This is one of the best coached division. It's probably the best coached conference in the country.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Guys like Pitino, Shaka Smart, McDermott, Hurley, even the coaches at the bottom, Ed Cooley is historically a good basketball coach.
Yep.
He's been bad with Georgetown, but
he's been there for a year,
Who's coaching Providence?
What?
Who's coaching Providence now?
I don't remember the guy's name, but he's also proven to be solid. Let me look it up.
Kim English?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. He used to coach George Mason. Yeah, that's him. So, it's a really well-coached division, which means that anything can happen. And no lead is safe until you're up 20 with 3 zeros on the clock, right? So, that's what I think. But this conference is full of teams that could make a ton of noise in the tournament. Let's move on now.
Okay.
Let's talk Big Ten.
Okay. Really weird conference.
Really weird conference.
Really weird conference. I want to say it's top heavy, but I have no idea. A lot of these teams
you have to talk about Rutgers.
Yeah, you do. This has been one of the most disappointing teams in recent memory. They've been borderline bad, and you have Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, 2 top 3 picks in this year's draft. I just don't think that they did enough to build around these 2 guys, which is crazy to say. You know what I mean? Because I they should be enough to win on their own, I think, maybe. But like this team just looks way out of sorts and way overmatched. They don't have really solid big play to go up against a team like Michigan. They're not as deep as Michigan State. They can't hang with Wisconsin, Maryland, or any of these teams. And I think it is really disappointing that a program like this that got an opportunity to have two players of this caliber has not capitalized on. You know what I mean?
It's even more shocking because it hasn't affected these guys' draft value at all.
No,
they're still
I mean,
gone
they've been
after the season.
fantastic. They've both been really good, freshmen, but they probably haven't gotten the recognition that they deserve because this team just has not been playing up to expectations. Any given day, though, either one of these guys could give you 30 points, but they're not going to win this conference. I think that the question marks around the Big Ten right now come with Illinois, Indiana, USC.
When talking about Indiana,
Purdue, really weird teams. Sorry, go on.
When talking about Indiana, you're already talking about who the next coach is. So this season's over. I mean, Mike Woodson is gone.
Yep. Which is the right move. I agree. But they just beat Purdue by 15.
Who also was a good coach for your program, but it's time for a new person at the helm.
I think Woodson was a horrible coach for your program. I think he did a really bad job there. I think he recruited well, but I don't think he got any of the players right. I think that the teams that are going to be shoo-ins to the tournament right now, you have Michigan State who's in, Michigan who's in, Wisconsin's in, Maryland's in. They're back. Good for them. Derek Queen has been fantastic, a top 3 freshman, in my opinion, in this upcoming class, despite the fact that he'll probably be a late first-round pick. UCLA's in, and I think Oregon's in. Purdue, I'm still a little bit, shy on, but I think that they'll also be in. And then the cutoff comes at Illinois, who is just
Purdue is in. They're ranked 20th in the country.
Right. Illinois just got embarrassed by Duke, so I don't really know what the story there is.
That was one of the biggest beatdowns I've ever seen in a college basketball game.
It's funny because two of the bigger ones that I've seen in recent memory, especially in Power 5 basketball, is Illinois versus UConn in the tournament last year, and Illinois versus Duke this year.
So they just hung Terrence Shannon Jr.'s jersey upside down. What are we doing?
I don't know. Really weird. But this conference, it feels like it's going to be Michigan or Michigan State at the top here. I think that Maryland could give you a shout. I don't think Wisconsin's super dangerous, and I think UCLA is kind of fraudulent. Oregon's a really good team, but I don't see them getting over the hump here. And as much as I want to say that I like Area 51 enough, because I do like Dusty May, and I do think that the fact that they have, a 7-footer playing point guard is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're going to win against Michigan State. Michigan State just showed that they were the best team in this conference by beating Michigan. And I really hate going against a team that's coached by Mike Izzo. By Tom Izzo. So for me, I think it's Michigan State. I'm going chalk again, and I'm taking the number 1 seed in the conference.
The fun part about Michigan State is that we have been waiting. I believe it's Cohen Carr's 3rd year.
Second.
It's his 2nd year in college.
Yep.
Last year he was bad. We can call it how it is. This year he has put together one of the most fun college mixtapes that we have seen in recent memory.
Well, you always knew he could fly.
He will dunk it from anywhere on the court. Yeah. Throw the ball towards the basket and he will finish the lob. I think that this conference is full of teams that, if they get hot at the right time, could make some noise. But they're going to need to kind of get that ball rolling. I'm going to go chalk 2. I like Dusty May. I hate Michigan.
Okay.
So I can't take Michigan. I also hate Michigan State. So I'm actually going to just decline making a pick altogether here. But you can infer that it's one of those 2 teams.
All right. I like it. The last conference we got to talk about is the SEC. What an exciting one.
Wow.
This is one where literally anything I think could happen. Because teams 1 through 10 are probably in the tournament right now. Alabama's in, or Auburn's in.
You could say 12.
Auburn's in, Florida's in, Alabama's in, Tennessee's in, Missouri's in, A&M's in, Ole Miss is in, Mississippi State's in, Kentucky's in, Vandy's on the bubble, Texas on the bubble, Arkansas on the bubble. That's what I got for this conference.
And Arkansas just had a huge win against a ranked opponent.
Correct.
Vanderbilt just had a huge win against a ranked opponent, and Texas has one of the best players in the country on their team. One of the best freshmen.
Yeah.
So there's a legitimate argument to have all 12 of those teams be in.
I mean, it's super competitive right now. I think you obviously have to look at the best teams in college basketball right now. Auburn and Florida are up there with Duke, in my opinion, as those are the perennial top three. Auburn has been, in my opinion, the best team all year, despite the fact that they lost to Florida, which I'll touch on a little bit later. Alabama is a really dangerous team on their night. No one can beat them. When they're playing offense the way that they play, no one can beat them. But they are a team that's susceptible to not be on their night sometimes, and that's what leads them to lose. Tennessee, another team with, really good players, really good pieces, and is well coached. But I think this is one of these teams that's kind of aging. You have Chaz Lanier and Zakai Ziegler leading the way. Both are fifth years. So it's interesting to see how this team is going to shake out. Another team that I want to mention is Kentucky, one of the best teams against ranked opponents this year, but one of the worst teams against unranked opponents this year. They've been struggling with a lot of injuries this year to Lamont Butler, Jackson Robinson, Kirk Risa. Andrew Carr's missed some time. Colin Chandler's missed some time. But on their night, they're really dangerous. Same with Arkansas, another team with it's a Cal team, right? So they have 100,000 really high caliber recruits and really good players. I think
this team has actually been horrendously disappointing this season.
Arkansas?
Yes.
I would agree, but I think that they're still dangerous. You know what I mean?
I think that they're dangerous because you can't count out guard play from John L. Davis, who made himself a name in the tournament, earned himself this transfer from the tournament.
Right, yeah.
Right, at FAU. And DJ Wagner, who came over from NC State, if I'm not. No, I'm sorry, he came from Kentucky.
Yeah, he's Kentucky.
And then Adu Thiero also came from Kentucky.
Yep.
With Cal. You basically took that team last year. That was a 2 seed, right? They were a 2 seed?
Yes.
And then added John L. Davis to it. And yet they are still 12th in their conference. And I really want to like them. They played incredibly well against Missouri the other day, who is another great team.
Yeah, really dangerous, really old team.
If they get into the tournament, they could possibly make some noise. But also, Cal hasn't made noise in the tournament in 6 years.
A while.
It's
a huge question mark because you are sitting at, 5 and 9 in conference.
I think their priority, what happens with Boogie Fland?
He's not playing. He's out for the season.
Yeah, I know. Is he gone?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Because if you can try and keep him and this core, next season you are looking at being one of the most dangerous teams in the country.
Yep.
If you can't, you will have to start over. And I think that is what Arkansas fans should be focused on.
Yeah, I think the question for the conference championship is between Auburn, Florida, Alabama, and Tennessee. It's really who you favor between those 3 teams, or those 4 teams. For me, it's Florida. This is the only other team that's beat Auburn this year. I think they did it at their house, which, kind of scares me a little bit. But this is a team that's really solid. They have really good guard play from Walter Clayton Jr., Elijah Martin, another guy from that FAU team that made a super deep run in the tournament a few years ago, is on this squad. And, they have a lot of really solid bigs. Alex Condon's been really good for them. Thomas Haws putting himself into first-round consideration. And I just think that this is a really well-coached and young, not even young, but their head coach is young. I think this is a really well-coached and well-oiled team that's really making some noise here. And I could see them defeating Auburn again if it comes down to it. But I do think that it'll be in Auburn, Florida, Alabama, or Tennessee at the top of the end of this, conference tournament schedule here.
I think that if you're looking for a dark horse team, I think that Texas A&M could make a bunch of noise if they get hot at the right time. They started off the season very well.
Yeah, Wade Taylor's a bucket.
For sure. If I have to take one of those 4 teams, I think that Alabama's a team where if they play badly enough, they can lose to any of the top 12, so I can't go with them. I don't want to go chalk. I think that Florida beats Auburn straight up, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So I'm gonna agree with you here. I'm gonna take the Florida Gators, which, by the way, NCAA basketball is better when the Gators are good.
Agreed.
All right, well, that kind of wraps up our conference championship predictions. We will be back next week, hopefully with some NBA stuff. NBA's been kind of dry so far, but
yeah,
definitely be on the lookout for more NCAA basketball stuff. And until then, this has been the Corner Office, and I'm Jack Burnt.
Penders. 1-3.